If you're a coach or a speaker or an author and you want to engage your audience, you can do that through storytelling. And I've got one of the best storytellers joining us on the episode today. He's going to give you some tips and some feedback on how you can become a great storyteller and how that can help you grow your business and grow the way in which you serve your clients. I'm Justin Janowski, and this is a Sales Strategies for Christian Coaches podcast. I remember launching my first coaching business and only getting one client before giving up. I then launched 3 years later again, got 3 clients, and went out of business because I didn't know what to do next. In 2018, I launched for the third time with Faith to Influence 6 years after my first attempt, and this time I experienced a different level of success as I collected over $250,000 in revenue my first year. The difference between those first 2 failed attempts and the third try was that I learned how to build systems around sales and marketing that could consistently work and help me build a successful business while honoring my clients. And that's what this podcast is for, to help you do the same with your business. Today, my guest is Loren Norris. Loren's an incredible coach. He's an incredible speaker and storyteller. He has coached government officials, entrepreneurs, nonprofit leaders across 5 nations, and he does amazing work through his Story Power Academy. He's speaking at our conference, Christian Coaches Academy Live, and he is someone who I heard speak recently at a conference. And I was so blown away by his capacity to tell stories and lead from stage that I approached him afterwards and I said, "We need you at our conference. I want to get to know you better." And we've developed a relationship, and I'm really excited to bring him to our audience. Loren, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm very honored to be a part of it.
Of course, my pleasure. I would love for you to share with the audience your story first of how you got into this work. Why Story Power Academy? Why in the coaching industry, the speaking industry? How did this all happen for you?
There's 3 different elements and timelines of that story that brought me to where we are today. I'll give you the shortest ones first. In the short run, I had a conversation with Pete Vargas and Grant Cardone, in which Pete pointed out to me that there were people paid $500,000 or more to stand on Grant's stage and deliver their talk. And their keynote was riveting and everyone was blown away by it. And then Pete took the stage, talked for 20 minutes, made $2 million. And what dawned on me in that moment was the keynote is not the end of the rainbow, it's the beginning. The big payday doesn't rest in what you get paid to walk on stage and say. It gets paid out in the transformation you bring to people. And most of that happens long after you leave the stage. And that was a huge revelation for me because, like you, I started and floundered for years, not only with no results, but I had people demanding me to be their coach. And I didn't want to do coaching. I just wanted to do keynote speaking. So I ran from it. I told them, no, I'm not doing that. I don't want to coach. And then when I started working with clients one-on-one, I was getting better results than I was on the stage, not just from a revenue generating standpoint, but better results for them. And the more time I spent with them, the better results they got. And so I began to invest in that completely differently. And that was the birth of the Story Power Academy in the end of 2022. How I got here, though, my first year in the Air Force, I walked into the little boys' bathroom in my middle school, dressed like a man who just got a promotion, because I had. And when I walked in, I found my mother on her knees scrubbing the urinal. And I said, "Mom, what are you doing?" And she said, "Well, I got to finish this bathroom and the one on the West Wing, and then we can go." And I said, "Why are you doing this?" She said, "Well, this is my job. I got to finish all these up before I can go." And I said, "But why are you doing this?" She said, "Son, I know I'm a high school dropout. This is the best I'll ever do." And I said, "That is not true. That's just a lie that you've been telling yourself, and you've chosen to believe it." Well, to cut that story really short, she went back to college at 50, graduated with a teaching certificate, and ended up spending the next many years, almost 20 years, before she retired from teaching. But she taught the kids who were telling themselves the same story. They had given up. They had a bad past. They had a rough ride. They had no parental guidance. They had bad choices in their life, and the school had done away with them. Now, I didn't realize this until I was speaking in speaking competitions, that the relationship between my mother giving up on herself and me rewriting other people's stories was a one-to-one relationship. It took me almost 25 years to catch on to that. But then I remember being at an event, it was all about making money, literally called 30 Days to Fast Cash. And we were in little groups of 10, and we were sharing our elevator pitches. And I was third from the last. I was number 7. I'm going around the circle. I'm listening to everybody with their elevator pitch. And everybody's elevator pitch was almost identical. It got to this lady that I had had a conversation with probably 20 minutes before we get into this little circle. And she was telling me about what she brought and how she planned to make some cash, what she was going to do with it, and all this stuff. And when it came to her turn, she threw out her elevator pitch like everybody else's. And I was like, eye roll, I'm bored stiff. It doesn't mean anything to me. So when it came to my turn, I ditched my own elevator pitch and I told the group the story she had told me. When I was done telling her story, she sold out of the product she brought with her before we got out of the first circle. I still have one. And I realized in that moment, I have a greater commodity in this skill set than in what I brought to sell. In fact, I packed up everything I took to that event to sell, put it back in my suitcase. I came home with half of it. The rest of it I gave away. But what I did do was secure my first group of accidental coaching clients who said, do that for my story, because I like that story a whole lot better than that elevator pitch. And I want that kind of story. So my very first coaching clients came out of that at $97 a pop. They'd tell their story. I'd tell it back to them. They'd record it and we would rock on. So those 3 braids come together, realizing you can make a whole lot more money by serving people than you can by standing on stage. Not to say standing on stage isn't serving people, but it's the beginning of the rainbow, not the end. My mother's story, just changing the story internally, changed the story externally, and that changed her life. And when I realized I had a skill for that, I was absent my own calling if I wasn't serving people with that story. So those 3 came together to bring us to where we are today. And then, like you said, systems, back office, some way to follow a customer through the journey. We're still working on that, perfecting that. We're not the best at it, but we keep serving our clients and pushing forward for their success, and we'll get ours as time comes. That was a long answer, wasn't it?
Wow. No, it's wonderful. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing a couple of stories to help us understand where you came from and how you got here. It's really beautiful. I'm curious, for the coach who's listening to this, who's maybe not a speaker, they're not planning on taking the stage in that way. They're coaching one-on-one or they're facilitating their group program, and maybe they haven't yet elevated their story and told it fully. Why is it so important for a coach and a leader in the service-based industry, a Christian entrepreneur, to be able to tell their story well?
In our 6 weeks training program, we call it the 7 C's. I'll just give you a couple of those now. If you've ever dealt with someone who feels like, well, I got to have all the plaques on my wall. You see the I love me wall behind them. And, you walk by and you're like, oh, look, you've got a degree in this and a certification in that. And you've been to this and you've been to that. But I wonder, subconsciously at least, can you actually do all those things somebody trained you to do? I mean, do you have practice doing them? And so credential is very important, licensing and knowing that somebody has actually allowed you to learn this skill. That's important. What's more important, though, is that you've actually done that skill at least a couple of times to see what kind of results you get. It'd be great if I ran around with a shirt on that says, I'm a nurse. But if I can't draw blood, there's a conflict here, both between me saying that I'm a nurse, which might be a fraud, and my ability to actually perform. And as well as I do, one of the challenges we see every day is there's zero barrier to entry to hanging a shingle on the door and going, I'm a coach. Which also means if you have that certification, that credential from whatever organization you've chosen to train under, if you don't have any experience doing it, the credential is one thing, but experience doing it and results is a whole different thing. If I try to give you the whole resume, A, it takes a minute, and B, it's boring as all get out. But if I tell you, this is the story of client A who's actually accomplished this, then you look at it and go, well, that's exactly what I want to accomplish. Could you help me? That's what I want to know. And the story of their success, of your process, is a whole lot more effective in convincing people. But I say the two have to go together. You have to have the credential, done the work, done the homework, done the study, submitted yourself to that authority and that leadership, and the credibility. So the credential and the credibility is what marries those two together. It's the difference between a knowledge and experience where wisdom comes from. I think the ability to tell your story and wrap those things in the story so it doesn't sound like a lecture, It doesn't sound like just a Q&A,
Mhm.
and it doesn't sound like a resume. It sounds like, wow, you've done this. You know exactly what you're talking about. That's what I need.
Yeah. So good. Credential and credibility, which is so important. And I think, when we're doing this the right way, of course, we're finding deep connection with people and they're finding themselves and seeing a bit of themselves in our stories. And, I think it's such a cool thing. And of course, Jesus was the great storyteller. And so we learn from him to bring that to the table. And I'm so happy to have people like you who are helping people do this well. You're going to be speaking at our conference and teaching people how to tell stories and connect with people and attract people through their stories and impact and serve people through their stories in such more meaningful ways. And so there's a lot coming there. And for somebody who's listening to this, there's still time to sign up for our conference. We would love for you to join us July 15th through 17th in Milwaukee and meet Jay Loren in person and learn more about storytelling from him. You can sign up at www.f2itribe.com/CCA Live 2026. We'll put that in the show notes, and we would love for you to join us at the conference. Jay Loren, though, for somebody who's listening now and is ready to tell a story tomorrow in a speaking engagement that they have or in their small group that they're leading, can you share at least a couple of tips on how we can tell our story in a more powerful and meaningful way that resonates right now?
I'll tell you the first thing, and this might shock some people. There's a little juxtaposition contrast. The first of which is to know no one really cares about your story. That's hard
Mm,
to hear. But when we think, well, I've been through this and I want to give you all the drama that I've lived through, and from the Christianese standpoint, we call it our testimony, right? And so we live through our
mhm,
testimony. The sad part is most people, when telling their story, when telling their testimony, spend 80% of their time giving credit to the enemy for what he's done wrong in our lives. 10% of the time saying, here's where I am now. And maybe 10% of the time talking about how wonderful things life will be when. And what we
mm,
lose in that journey is that if somebody hasn't followed that entire exact journey, it doesn't really resonate with them. What does resonate is that I had a battle of wills with my 2-year-old granddaughter the other day. She'd finished almost the entire bowl of macaroni and cheese. Honestly, though, she cheated because she was taking it one noodle at a time. And when she thought I wasn't looking, she would drop it over the edge of her high chair for the dog to eat. So we're down to the last 4 noodles. We're battling over these noodles. I just want you to finish those 4. Just commit to finish those 4. And in this battle of wills, she decides I have the trump card. You know what the trump card is with a 2-year-old? Potty training. I have to go to the potty. And she proceeded to do so right there in her high chair because I refused to let her up until she ate the last 4 noodles. If we could just get past those, I just want you to know that you have to finish your meal. You don't get to jump up and run around or feed it to the dog. And see, that quick story resonates with anyone who's ever done potty training, anyone who's ever dealt with a stubborn 2-year-old, anyone who's ever been in that moment where we're going to have a crisis of will and determination right here. And
mm,
the ability to transfer that meaning, that metaphor, that illustration into, I don't know, maybe you've dealt with a boss who's like a tyrannical 2-year-old. I'm going to get my way at all costs. Maybe you've dealt with a
mm,
client who has that same kind of mentality. I'm going to get my way at all costs. I don't care what it costs you. In fact, I don't even care what it costs me as long as I get to win. And when
mm,
you deal with someone like that, part of the process of being a good coach, the process of being a good leader, even from the stage, is the ability to say, I'm going to lay the facts out there. I'm going to lay the truth out there, and I'm going to let you enjoy the consequences. And so she sat there in wet clothes until that last noodle was eaten. Am I a bad guy? In some people's books, but she hasn't had an accident in her high chair since then. Isn't that bizarre? Right? So that story is so much different than, well, I'm certified in this and I did this. And do I tell people I have a world championship speech? Well, yeah, I made it to the semifinals in 2 different contests. So I've done that more than once. I have a President's Lifetime Achievement Award from 2021 and my John Maxwell certification, and I coached Dale Carnegie for 5. And who cares? Nobody cares. Nobody cares about that stuff. What they care about is when you can tell them a story that resonates with them in the condition or the pain or the process they're in right now. And the win looks
yeah,
like, I hear your story. It really connects with me. That's win number 1. Win number 2 is my story is so much like your story. I have to tell you my story. I can't not tell. They're compulsively driven to tell you their story. Win number three is at the moment that they realize they just told you the same story you told them, and there's a major difference. And the major difference is they're still dealing with the pain, the shame, the problem, the trauma, whatever it is, and there's no end in sight. But when they hear your story, they realize that's the past and there is a future. And now I want the solution that you applied. That's the third win. And not only do I want it, but I'm absolutely thoroughly committed to taking action on it so that I can get the same results that you had. That story can be 2 minutes long. It can be 10 minutes long. It can be 5 2-minute stories together. But when people hear them and like, that's me. I felt like that. I feel like that today. How do I get past that? If you've got an answer, baby, I want it. That's what I'm here for. And so telling stories in that way really elevates us. But it's not the saga. It's not the novella. It's not the full testimony that gives so much glory to the broken past. It's the aha moment where people go, yeah, I lived in that moment too. I mean, it wasn't my granddaughter, it was actually my son when he was 4 and he still did the same thing. And right. So the parts of the story that can shift are as personalized as each individual human. The nature of the story is what deeply resonates and connects with people.
So good. So what I'm hearing here is that the best story, ideally, for our most ideal client speaks to where we were, and it probably is where they are. And so I think part of the thing in finding what story to tell is recognizing where is our most ideal client right now? What's their current state? What are they experiencing? What feels hard or heavy? And then thinking about where they want to go that we've already been, and how do we get from here to here? That's the transformation in the story. And I love what you're sharing about, telling stories in such a way that they want to tell theirs back, but they have this recognition that like, oh, they're still in the story. They're in that kind of climactic moment and they haven't found their way through it yet. And you had that hero's journey in the end. And that's why somebody might want to work with us, is because they hear where they are in where we were, and they hear where they want to go in the end of our story. I think that's really cool. How can we tell our story in such a way that they want to tell their story back? I thought that was a really interesting thing you brought up.
Well, a lot of that has to do with authenticity. There's a phrase from Bob Berg in his book, The Go-Giver. We tend to do business with people we know, like, and trust, is what he says. In fact, he adds to that a little bit. He says, not only do we do business with people we know, like, and trust, but we'll do business with the people we know, like, and trust when the price is wrong, when the product is inferior, when the service leaves a little bit to be desired. I mean, think about how many times you've done work with someone who's a relative, when you know if you pay just a little more, you could get it better down the road. Or you got charged more by your relative than you would have if you'd gone anywhere else, but they need the business. And even though the work's a little inferior, you kind of overlook it because you know them, you like them, and you trust them. The challenge for a lot of our storytelling is we tell the story that matters to me. If I'm telling the story and it makes me feel good, it's cathartic, it's relieving, I feel like I'm so glad I got that off my chest, then the odds that that connects with someone else in a way that they go, ooh, I want to be like that, is pretty narrow. But when you're authentic and you're like, look, this is what I went through, for better or for worse, it's where I am. It's the truth that I lived in, the truth as I experienced it. I don't like the phrase, my truth. I don't think we have a right to that. That's a philosophical thing. Or is it? Because now we have a question of integrity and core values. And when we talk about authenticity and we talk about core values and we talk about philosophy and we talk about worldview, we can easily drop those things into a story in a word or two and cause people to go, you're my kind of guy. It's that little statement that doesn't sound like you're beating them over the head with something, especially evangelism. I know so many people, they want to preach to you because they feel like you're going to slip into eternity before they finish talking. They've got to talk faster. They've got to talk louder. They've got to make sure you hear everything you do. And you're going to have to apply right now. You're going to get saved before we walk away. Right. Could be a bus in the driveway. And that pressure doesn't draw someone like, can I pray for you? That's a whole different level of relationship. But the story that allows them to go, you get me, builds that exposed authenticity that is the definition of no. Well, what is like? Well, it's not, hey, you're cool, dude. I like your hairstyle. Let's go to the beach and have a beer. That's not like. What is our common ground? Where are we similar? I
Mm.
had the opportunity from cash tips that was given to me at an event recently. I had a $100 bill in my pocket. Don't always have a $100 bill in my pocket. Well, we stopped at Subway to grab dinner 2 nights ago. They were closing. The lady was a little frustrated. It was already the end of the day. They'd already wiped out their meatballs. That was the daily special. That's what I wanted, was that cheap foot-long meatball sandwich. I was all about that $7 meatball sandwich as a whole meal. You can't get a better deal than that. And she looks at me, she goes, we are out of meatballs. And I'm like, how long does it take to meatballs? She said, 30 minutes. And we closed in 30 minutes. I said, I can wait. She did not look at me like she was happy about that. In fact, she said, I'm not making more meatballs. She was just very direct about it. So we ordered what I didn't want, sat down to have our dinner, and then realized she wasn't just saying the counter closed, they're closing the whole building. And so she's mopping around our feet. She's putting chairs up on the tables all around us. Meanwhile, complaining, she lives in a house of 10 people. She's the only one with a job. She's a single mom with 2 special needs kids. She's come back from Colorado to take care of her. She's not talking to me. She's talking to people behind the counter, but she's talking really loud and we can hear it across the room. And so I walked back up and she had just wrapped all the cookies so they'd stay fresh for the next day. I'm like, I think I'll have a cookie. And she looked at me like I had asked to set her child on fire. Like, you're going to make me open the cookies? I said, well, which one do you have just in a pair of 2? She goes, oatmeal raisin. I'm like, I'll eat oatmeal raisin. So she pulled them out and I pulled out that $100 bill. And I said, can you make change? And again, that tiger look, like, you're trying to eat my baby. I mean, just angry. And I said, I'm kidding. That's for you. But if you'll ring me up for the cookies, I'll pay with my card. Her entire countenance changed. And I said, I was raised the only son of a single mom. And my heart is still soft toward them because I married one too. Everything shifted. Now this guy who came in and ruined my night because I don't get out on time, this guy who's sitting at a table making a mess when I'm trying to mop and clean up, this guy who's keeping me from getting home to my family is not my enemy anymore. But see, that story isn't about me. It's about connection. It's about her. It's about seeing her where she is. And then even just that one little statement, I was raised the only son of a single mom, and then I married one. It's the know, like, and trust factor that happens really fast. I'm sure the cash didn't hurt that encounter in that relationship, but just being able to say, you see me, you hear me, you have mercy on me, that changes a relationship really fast. Those kind of stories are not about the saga. They're not about the lifelong. It's about a moment in time where a lesson was learned or taught that everyone can relate to and go, that was a valuable lesson. I can carry that. And I can probably think of a moment in my life where I did exactly the same thing. I mean, I bet if I asked Justin, when was the last time you gave somebody cash that you really didn't have to give away? I mean, it wasn't like it was extra, let me just rummage through my glove box and see how many $50 bills I got laying in there. It wasn't like that. It was like, this is going to be at a stretch. I had to get permission from my wife before I did it. But when I did it, it was good for my heart. It was good for her heart. My wife was okay with it. It's not a crisis for us. But I bet if you went to everybody in the audience at CCA, someone to a T, every one of them have probably at some time said, yeah, I gave when it was hard to give. I did for somebody else when I was really hoping somebody would do for me. What does that tell you about the people? Well, for anybody who's like, you're a fool, you give me the $100, I'll put it in the stock market, I'll go buy that. Those are not my customers. I mean, I love them, but they're not my customers. It's my customers, the one who says, I've done that, or I've never had the opportunity to do that. How do I spot them? Yeah. Now we can go deep.
Yeah. Wow. Cool. And I do see, people would want to raise their hand and tell their story of something similar. When you share a story like that, that resonates. I love the point you made that you're not telling the saga, you're speaking to a moment that illustrates
Making a
the
moment,
point.
not a memoir. That's
A
the first
moment,
teaching point in
not
my slides. Making a
memoir.
moment, not a memoir.
Moment, not a memoir. I love that. Okay, last question I want to ask you. Somebody's listening to this and they're inspired like I am every time I talk to you to say, I want to tell a better story. I want to tell the right story. I want to implement the right story into my webinar or my training or my keynote. what is a first step or two they could take right now to begin crafting the right story to tell?
Well, I have to be honest and say, I don't believe there is one right story. In fact, I tell all my clients from the first session, by the time we're done, you're going to have two things: a quiver full of stories and a skill set so that if you get out of the car and trip over a Coke bottle, you have a new story. Because what we're really looking for is these connecting words. These are the emotional words that are buried in the story that very subtly allow someone else to go, I felt like that. And I know that feeling, or
Mm,
I long for that feeling, right? When you connect with people deeply and emotionally like that, that's not one story that does that. That's a skill set that allows you to do that in every story. And so when you
mm,
can identify a moment, and this came to me when I was doing my world championship speech with Toastmasters, I had one story and it was so good. It was a 7-minute story. And when I told that story, man, the ladies would just line up down the room and they wanted a hug from me and from my daughter. And it was all wonderful. And then I realized out of all of the people in the room, the only ones getting up are the women who had a relationship issue with their father. The women who have healthy relationships with dad, they're like, that's cute. And the ones that are men or teenage boys, they couldn't care less about that story. And so it dawned on me
mm,
that I need another story that involves different characters. And then I
yeah.
realized the story that I tell about my daughter is a tearjerker. The one that I'm creating now, that I'm crafting now, that I'm remembering now, that I'm recalling now, I don't make them up. They have to be authentic. I have to have lived through it or researched it. There's a way to qualify these stories. In fact, the story powered grid for our elite clients and our retreat members, the story powered grid is 37 columns in a spreadsheet that you have to qualify every story before you put it on stage. So as I'm crafting this second one, I also realize not only are there characters here, but this could be funny. So now we have the emotional
Mm,
rise and fall and rise and fall and rise and fall. And that rhythm is what allows people to breathe in the story, even when it's only 2 minutes long. So I took the first seven
mm,
minute story and I trimmed it to two. And then I added another 2 minute story behind it. And then I realized now I've talked to all the women who have daughters and all the daughters who have a father. And I've talked to all the sons and their fathers. But what about the husbands and wives? And so I crafted the last story and I put them all together for the world championship. And so when I say you should have 3 stories or 100 stories, what I mean is there's going to be a moment inevitably that you're going to step up on the stage and you've already written a speech. I mean, all the slides are together. You already know when you get to slide 7, your presenter notes are there. You know exactly what to say, what the highlights are, and what you're going to walk away from the screen with, right? And then you walk away from the screen. And because we're believers, we have a different level of responsibility. We step away from the screen and our notes don't matter anymore. And the Holy Spirit points out that one on the 3rd row, 4th seat in. It said, you see her? She's not in your notes. She's in
mm,
mine. And if she leaves here tonight and you haven't touched her heart, she's got a bottle of pills and a bottle of alcohol under the seat of her car and she'll never leave the parking lot. And that's on you. And when that settles in your heart and you realize, I have a responsibility because I have a very unique power.
mm,
And if I don't bring that sharpened sword, that skill set to bear in this moment, we may lose her for eternity. And it's on me.
mm.
I'm not ultimately responsible for that. That's her choice. It's her decision. But if I had the chance to stop her from running in traffic and I didn't, can I live with myself? That's what we need to realize as storytellers. We may have crafted the most brilliant story in the world, but it's not the story, it's the skill. And when you
Mm,
have the skill, you look at it in the audience, you realize this one individual, him, her, she, they, whatever, has not moved the entire time. How do I reach their heart? Well, I've got to be able to, in a moment's notice, come up with an event that they look like the audience that I'd be talking to. They were involved in the event when it happened, in the incident, in the moment, and be able to craft that on the fly because I have all the skill set. What emotional words am I going to use? What connecting am I going to use for them? What scenario lets them feel like they're part of it? What call to action is most relevant for them in this moment? If there was nobody else on the earth, how do I connect with them? And you don't get to play 20 questions first. You have to have the power of observation skills. You've got to understand people's needs first. And now all of a sudden, like the dagger from the pocket, you're like, I'm ready. I got the skills. I've imagined our encounter. I've got just the story. That's
mm,
really the pinnacle of accomplishment in the story power process. is when you get to the place where you're like, Coke bottle, tripped over getting out of the car. Here's what I learned. Here's the analogy. Here's the lesson. I look at the audience and I can tell that story based on who's in front of me. Obviously, you still have your target audience. You have your perfect avatar. They know exactly what they need from you. And all they're waiting for is for you to give them the content, the context, the credibility, the clarity to know that you can deliver. And when you throw that on the table, they're like, that's what I've been looking for. It's like that pizza buffet, and you walk by and you look at everything on the buffet and you're like, no, none of that makes me hungry. Well, I'm making a pineapple and spiced apple dessert pizza right now. I'll wait for that. You better make two, right? Because I know what I want. I can't put my fingers on it until you describe it to me. And that's our job as coaches, as leaders, is to put in front of people the reason for the hope that we have, the substance of things hoped for and not yet seen. How do we describe it in a way that they go, I'll have some of that?
Yeah.
I didn't answer your question very well, did I?
No, this is really good. This is really good. The points that I'm receiving and taking notes on is the value of having a quiver of stories, and more importantly, developing the skill set of being a great storyteller, because we all experience moments every single day, every single week, every single month. And when you're present to the moments that you're in and you know how to tell stories, and you've got that skill set developed as you do, you can create a story from so many of these moments and be able to apply them to the right situation for the right person in the right moment and be impactful through that. And I think that's really beautiful. And so, man, I feel like I could ask you 100 more questions about storytelling and speaking and all the things. And I probably will at CCA Live. I hope people who are listening come and meet Jay Loren in person and get to learn more from you. In the meantime, though, if people want to learn more from Jay Loren, you can go to www.storypoweracademy.com and get a whole lot more information about him and the work that he does. That's www.storypoweracademy.com. Jay Loren, thank you so much for joining us. I'll be excited to be with you in person as we're recording this about 1 month from now.
Excellent. I very much look forward to it, and I am very honored to be a part of what you're doing.
God bless you. See you soon.
Thanks, sir. Have a great day.